This story is so disturbing that even I hesitated to tell it. Sophie had just moved into her new apartment in Toronto, Canada. It was her first place of her own, a fresh start after a tumultuous few years. To make the space feel more like home, she spent her weekend scouring local flea markets and thrift shops. That's when she found the antique mirror. It was an ornate piece, its frame decorated with intricate carvings of flowers and vines. The glass was old, slightly fogged, but still beautiful. Sophie admired it for a long while, imagining how it would look on the wall of her living room. She purchased it, thinking it would be the perfect touch. At first, everything seemed fine. She hung the mirror by the hallway and went about settling in. But over the next few days, Sophie started to notice strange things. At night, when the apartment was still and quiet, she'd sometimes catch a glimpse of something odd in the reflection, a flicker of movement, a shadow that wasn't hers. She brushed it off as a trick of the light or her imagination. It had been a busy week, but as the days passed, the oddities grew more unsettling. One evening, while sitting on her couch, Sophie glanced at the mirror and saw something that made her stomach drop. A woman's face, pale and sorrowful, staring back at her from within the glass. The woman was no one Sophie recognized. Her eyes were wide with fear, her mouth slightly open as if trying to speak, but no sound came from the reflection. Sophie's heart raced, and she quickly looked away, convincing herself it was just another illusion caused by the fading light. The occurrences grew worse. Sophie could no longer ignore them. She began seeing flashes of the woman's face, even during the day, when the apartment was brightly lit. Sometimes, Sophie swore she saw the reflection of the woman moving in the mirror, her hand reaching out, her lips forming words Sophie couldn't hear. The atmosphere in the apartment grew heavier, and Sophie found herself constantly looking over her shoulder, as though someone was watching her. One evening, Sophie decided to research the history of the apartment. She visited the local library and asked around the neighborhood, hoping to uncover something that might explain the strange occurrences. After days of digging through old records, she found something disturbing. The apartment had once belonged to a woman named Evelyn Harper, a young woman who had been brutally murdered there nearly 50 years ago. According to the records, Evelyn had been found dead in the very hallway where Sophie had placed the mirror. No one was ever convicted of the crime, and the case had gone cold. The police report mentioned that Evelyn had been terrified in her final moments, and some claimed that she had been speaking to someone before her death, though no one had ever figured out who. Sophie's heart sank as she pieced together the chilling story. It seemed the mirror, the very object she had brought into her home, had once belonged to Evelyn. It was the only thing that remained in the apartment after her death, and it had been passed down through the years. Evelyn's restless spirit had somehow become tied to the mirror, her tragic fate forever etched into its glass. The realization hit Sophie like a wave. The woman in the mirror wasn't just a ghost. She was trapped, trying to communicate her sorrow, her fear. The mirror had become a conduit for Evelyn's unresolved torment, and Sophie had become a part of that tragedy. Sophie's unease grew. The woman's reflection became clearer, more defined, her eyes pleading for help. She could feel the presence of the spirit every time she passed by the mirror, as though Evelyn were right there, silently reaching out. One night, as Sophie sat on her bed, she could hear a soft whispering coming from the mirror. The voice was faint, but desperate, the words indecipherable. Sophie tried to block it out, but the whispering grew louder, the face in the mirror becoming more vivid. With trembling hands, Sophie reached for the mirror, hoping to end the madness. But as soon as her fingers touched the glass, the reflection shifted. Evelyn's face distorted, twisted in agony, her eyes wild with terror. Sophie pulled her hand back in fear, but it was too late. She could feel a cold, heavy presence enveloping her, and for the first time, she realized the terrible truth. She had become a part of Evelyn's story. The curse of the mirror had claimed her, just as it had claimed Evelyn before her. The apartment, once a fresh start for Sophie, had become a prison, a place where the past and present collided, where a tragic spirit reached out to the living, forever trapped in the reflection of an old, haunted mirror. Hit subscribe and don't dare miss what's coming next. Or the next scream you hear might be your own.